Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now you're welcome along. Very happy to say Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent is in studio. You're very welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Good to see you.
Likewise. And Niamh Briggs, you're on the line there. How you doing?
Hi guys.
Great to have you with us. So United Rugby Championship is back with us. Week 6. We have Connacht Ospreys on Friday. We have Munster in South Africa, which will be an interesting litmus test for the competition. They're away to the Bulls. That's on Saturday, 5:45 Irish time. And then 8 o'clock Saturday evening, Leinster against Ulster. So that is all on the way. A few bits going on today. Rory, eligibility rule change from January 1st, 2022. I saw this generally applauded as a great thing on Twitter this afternoon. Haven't looked too much into it. As I understand it, this is going to allow international players to switch allegiance to another country by virtue of birthright. So I suppose the big change is that players who meet this criteria but who have already represented another country will also be eligible to transfer once they've stood down from international rugby for 3 years prior to the move. So people are quickly pointing to the possibilities for the Pacific Islands in particular.
Yeah, I think that's where this will mostly come into effect. I did have a little look to see when AJ McGinty last played for the USA to see if Ireland could get him back and boost the out half options, but he last played for the USA in the last summer, so he'll be a little bit old by the time he would qualify if he was to go that way. But I suppose there might be scope for Ireland to pick up a couple of Irish qualified players who played for England over the years. What it will do from an Irish perspective, will it make life harder at the next World Cup, because we're likely to have Tonga or Samoa, probably Tonga, in our pool, and by then they could have Charles Piutau, Maliki Fekitoa, George Mwala, I think, and a couple of other very, very good former All Blacks who went to Europe having kind of either finished their All Black career or chosen to finish their All Black career, and that 36 months period has elapsed and now they're qualified. They will be allowed to choose to play for Tonga again, and what it will do will allow these players to play international, like some of the best players in the world, to play international rugby again, and will strengthen teams that they don't get pillaged in the way in the way people I think perceive them to be pillaged. But I think a lot of players will be capped once or twice by the All Blacks. The word they used is captured, and I think it kind of speaks to what it is. You're then trapped in international terms. You move to England, you're not allowed to play for the country that you maybe have a connection to. So I like it. I think it's good, and it will make those countries more competitive at the next World Cup, and that's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah. As you're talking there, Ethan Asawa jumped to my mind.
Yeah, well, he could have played for New Zealand after 3 years, but I don't think he would have been allowed to play for Ireland. When if he hadn't had that one cap, I think Ethan Asawa probably would have been the first project player. But you have to have a grandparent, a parent, or be born in the country, so it wouldn't have worked in Ireland's favour. But he could have had that Fiji cap, done 3 years, and played for the All Blacks, and he was good enough to play for the All Blacks at the time.
I meant for the All Blacks.
Yeah.
Stop being so Irish centric, will you?
Sorry.
Wouldn't have benefited us. Don't care.
Yeah.
I think of Issa here. Could have been an All Black.
He could have been, and he always, I think, regretted that Fiji cap, which was really unfortunate. We never got to see him play the World Cup, for example, and he's a player whose skills should have been showcased. Piutau is the example, and Piutau,
remind me of his story then. So
he played for the All Blacks. Ulster offered him a whopper deal, and he before the 2015 World Cup, I think in 2014 he moved to Ulster, and the All Blacks basically blacklisted him in the way that Ireland kind of blacklisted Zebo, and he moved to, once you're out of New Zealand you don't play for the All Blacks anyway, and hasn't played for international rugby since, but was more than good enough. His brother, I think, is captain Tonga. His whole family, I think he may be New Zealand born, but his entire family is Tonga, and he's very connected to Tonga. He's played for Wasps. Sorry, it's not Wasps. He's playing in England. He's playing for Bristol Bears, of course, under Pat Lam, and he's been an advocate of this. He really wants to play for Tonga, and he will probably play for Tonga at the next World Cup.
What do you think, Niamh?
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. We saw kind of last year when Maliki Fekitoa got to play for Tonga in the sevens in the Olympics. So I think from that aspect, and there's been a huge surge of young Pacific Islanders that go to school over in big New Zealand rugby schools and therefore qualified to play for New Zealand. I think they have the opportunity to be able to go back, and they go because for loads of different reasons. Obviously the rugby's obviously better, but it's a lot to do with money and helping their families back at home. So for them to be able to have an opportunity to be able to go back and represent them, I just think it's only a good thing, and it helps those Pacific Island nations, the likes of Tonga, Samoa, and hopefully we get to see them to be funded better now by World Rugby, give them opportunities to be able to showcase their talents.
Okay, very good. Let's have a little last look back on the November series before we look ahead to the weekend coming. So starting with the men, first of all, Niamh. I mean, it's very notable at the weekend. New Zealand, Australia, South Africa all beaten on the same day. First time since 2002 that had happened. I must confess, watching France-New Zealand, I mean, it's a thrilling game and wonderful, but it definitely copper fastened in the mind the sense that we didn't play New Zealand at their best. And you listen to Mario Ledesma after the game on Sunday against Ireland, and he's saying, well, like, the mental health of the players even is shattered at the moment. I think increasingly as the dust settles, what's looming large in my memory is, yes, Ireland played very well, but I think we saw a fairly battered and bruised Southern Hemisphere showing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we spoke about it, before and after the game in relation to the Argentinian team. They hadn't been home in 17 weeks. It's a long, long time to be on the road. And I know that most of the players are, European based, but the fact that you're living out of a suitcase and going through so many COVID isolations, it must have been really, really difficult for them, and it showed. I think they just didn't really look like they had much going on for them during that game. And to be fair to Ireland, I thought there was a lot of niggle in it from the Argentinians. I thought anytime Ireland tried to play, Argentina just killed the ball, and they were able to kind of revert back to a little bit of a plan B in terms of being able to just take it up the jumper and go tight. And I said it after the New Zealand game, I think you got to judge it in the calendar year. I think, they're at the end of a very, very long season for them. Ireland have to go down there this summer, which I can't wait for. But also, like, that France and New Zealand game was case in point. They obviously had a really poor start. France were excellent, but they got it back to like 27-25 or 27-24, I think it was. Just ran out of steam. They really did. I think the yellow card was a big thing, but also they just looked incredibly fatigued. Found it really hard to get over the gain line, and the French defence was just superb. Like, it was absolutely awesome to watch. And I think Sean Edwards has just been the difference maker for France, I think, over the last couple of years. His ability to be able to get them to be so disciplined, which is not something that we would have attributed to French teams. So, yeah, look, I think obviously the Six Nations is going to be really good now, but I do think that we need to take it in jest, the performances and the scorelines over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Rory, it was against France in particular where I really looked at New Zealand and thought, oh, they must be 20% off here.
I see that point, and I do accept it. I think New Zealand are at the end of a long year and have had all the adversity that Niamh has spoken about there with Argentina as well, and South Africa coming. They've been on the go since the Lions tour and still should have beaten England. Overpowered England, and only for a couple of missed kicks by Handré Pollard and some poor discipline. Didn't get over the line. But at the same time, the Southern Hemisphere teams don't have a divine right to be the best teams in the world. And when France and England in particular have their act together and have alignment between their club, France have 14 professional clubs, and they've been under 20 world champions a couple of times in the last couple of years. They've an incredible depth of player coming through. They seem to have alignment between their clubs and their international team for the first time in the professional era. And they were better than New Zealand on Saturday, and they played with more more invention, with more energy, and obviously the energy probably comes from what we've spoken about. But I wouldn't take away, like, you still have to beat what's in front of you. And I think Ireland and France went about it in a way that would suggest that this wasn't a one-off, and the fact that Ireland have now done it 3 times in 5 years suggests that Ireland are getting closer to being able to meet New Zealand. That gap that was there. I think 2015 was when the Rugby Championship teams were in the semi-final, was the apex of their dominance, and England got their act together after that and beat New Zealand in a World Cup semi-final, and France have gotten their act together subsequent to that and are hosts in was it 2 years' time. And I think that like these scorelines won't be as unusual as we go on. They'll still be very competitive, but we're in an era now where 5 or 6 or 7 teams, and it's not a lot. I know that the rugby, people who don't like rugby will say but they're all getting a lot out of themselves, and that makes life way more interesting, and makes these internationals way more interesting, and makes the next summer, when the European teams are tired, like, you will see the flip side of that. And then at the World Cup we get that coming together when everyone's fresh, and that's when we get the real say. And for England to do that, so I think I wouldn't dismiss these results. I understand the caveats, but I do think France and Ireland both earned those wins, and played a part in New Zealand looking so lost. And it's very rare you see those ashen faces. They place doubts in their minds that have never been there before, and we don't know how to respond to that.
Well, watching New Zealand TV, even again this week, Niamh, the big conversation they're having is, we can't cope with line speed. Our attack can't cope with line speed. I was thinking, Thank God. We've been having this conversation about 4 years. I'm glad you're having it now.
Yeah, I just think some of the selections didn't help that. I don't think they have a back row that's settled. I don't think they have a 10 centre partnership that's settled. It seems to be Mo'unga, Barrett in and out every week. It's very hard to get any continuity. It's very hard to build relationships and partnerships when the centre partnerships are changing all the time as well. And I think that makes a huge difference. I think for New Zealand, what shocked me probably most was not really their attack. Well, their skills under pressure for sure. They made a lot of handling errors, but also how much they were physically dominated on this tour, not just against France, but Ireland too. And I think that won't sit well with the New Zealand folk down below. They live off the fact that they're bigger and better than everybody else, and they can kind of bully teams around the park. We just didn't see that. We saw Retallick going back in tackles. We saw Whitelock going back in tackles. It's not something that we see very often. So, yeah, I just think it was a strange tour for them. And they've definitely got to go back to the drawing board and how they want to go about it. It just, when you watch Super 15 or, their Super Rugby Arto, I think it's called now, that, the likes of Mo'unga just plays so freely. He just plays on the gain line, his ability to put players into space, his ability to kick pass on the run. He's one of the best in the world. We don't really see that with New Zealand. And it's almost like he's not comfortable in that black shirt at times. And I think that in order for New Zealand to be able to steer it around the park properly, they need somebody like him, because he's kind of got a little bit of a game changer. And players like Mackenzie's gone to Japan now for a year. That's a big loss to their system, because he's definitely, for me, one of their best outside backs. They just haven't used him enough, I don't think. So it'll be interesting to see what way they go now.
So a question which is a little bit cheap, but let's take stock at the end of the international calendar. The way I put it to Fiona Hayes and Matt Williams on Monday was, let's imagine all the teams get to go away and have a month off and refresh and come back and play a World Cup. Who wins that World Cup? Now, Matt said France. Fiona Hayes ruined herself forevermore with me by saying Ireland. She said this on air. She said this out loud.
I heard.
It's a disgrace.
I texted her after. Yeah.
So we're blaming her. But in all honesty, and actually I was listening to Rory's Irish Independent colleagues on the podcast this afternoon. Ian Madigan and Luke Fitzgerald both went for South Africa. They know what they're about. They have a purpose in how they play, and Cup Rugby, their style suits it beautifully. So an array of opinions. What are we saying here, Niamh?
I think it's really difficult, and I know that that's not me sitting on the fence. I can see where Matt's coming from with France. Their strength and depth is incredible. These young players that are coming in, they were just exceptional the other night. It was just unbelievable to watch from every facet. They were incredibly competitive up front. Their ability to jouer, as they call it was just phenomenal. I can't stop watching that clip of Entimac in the corner. It was just absolutely outrageous. But I like, I can see that. I think England can be thereabouts. I think Eddie Jones seems to have got a good balance, those young lads that are coming in. And the longer that they get together over the next while, I think that they're only going to improve. The longer that Marcus Smith's in a 10 test jersey, he's only going to get better. So at the moment, I think you're looking at that kind of, those kind of two teams. I think I can see, I'm not going to say Ireland like Fiona, but I can see, and yeah, I think it's too difficult to call. I actually can't. I think it's generally very difficult to call.
Get off the fence. Get on. Come on.
I can't just give one.
There's a gun to gun to your head here. Who would win?
It's hard to see past France at home.
Okay,
fair.
There we go. That wasn't so hard.
It was very difficult.
No, I do take your point. Finely balanced. You?
South Africa.
Okay.
I mean, I think England in 2 years' time could be very good, but their pack got it. I don't know how they won that game. They were eviscerated up front by the South African forwards. I think the Irish tight five will look at that England, if it's Bevan Rod and the others who were there, very inexperienced players who were basically being fast tracked, they'll eat them alive. I think the French will eat them alive as well, and South Africa did eat them alive in every part of the game apart from the scoreboard. But yeah, Cup Rugby, I would agree. I haven't listened to Luke and Ian yet, but I would agree with that. The Cup Rugby, the way they play, that slow poison way they just extract the win from you and kill you just slowly across it. And I actually find it fascinating when the other team, the problem I have at the Lions series was the Lions tried to do it as well. When the other team tries to play a different way, it's really interesting clash of styles. It's when you try and match them, and they're in Ireland's pool. I think Ireland have will if they are, like, if the World Cup was next week, I'd love to see Ireland play South Africa next week just to get a real measure of where Ireland are. France the same. I think France and Ireland missed the trick by not having South Africa in this window, because I think they are probably the true test of where you are as a team right now.
Yeah. Okay. Niamh, on the Irish women beating Japan and I suppose getting 2 wins from 2 and beginning to get some momentum going again, what are we saying about this group and this team with the new coach ahead of the Six Nations? Because it's been a fairly miserable conversation around this team for the last couple of months.
Yeah, I think, look, I was delighted to see them get the win. I think more for Junior than anybody else. I think brilliant send-off. She single-handedly dragged them in through that game. And I don't think I've ever seen such a complete performance from one player, and so dependent on. But yeah, look, I think Greg has a big job. It's really interesting. I think it's almost like a blank canvas now for him to be able to work. He's got a good contract, so he knows he's in this World Cup cycle. And he's just got to go back to basics. I think they're catch pass, get away from systems, get back to basics, being able to execute your skills under pressure, to be fit enough to be able to get around the park, to be able to do that, and then be able to play with your strengths. I don't think, and it's no disrespect to any of those players, I just don't think it's probably been to where it needed to be at the moment, but also they've got to kind of find a style that suits them as well. Like, physically dominant, it's not going to be, we're going to find that difficult because we're smaller in nature than the likes of an England or a France. So you've got to look at other ways. How can you get around teams? Get around by moving the ball. You've got to be fitter. You've got to be able to execute passes. So, yeah, I actually think it's kind of exciting. I think it's an exciting project for Greg. But it just kind of feels like it's closing of a chapter now. And I just can't wait for us to be talking about good rugby and good rugby stories from Ireland, from the women's squad in Ireland, because it's definitely been a tough few months.
We saw 4 very important players away in Dubai for Sevens tournament and missing out in the Japan game. Do we know, for instance, to what extent these players and others will be available, say, during the Six Nations next year?
Yeah, I actually don't know, and I think that's definitely something that Greg and Ant, I suppose, will sit down and chat about. I think there's definitely tournaments happening at the moment, albeit COVID, but those tournaments are happening during Six Nations. And I just think now is a perfect opportunity to line everything to one side or the other. You've got to have girls that are playing week in, week out at clubs. That then generates a better club game, and then you can transfer that then into the national side, I think. But I can see why you need a crossover at the moment. The player depth in Ireland isn't very big, so when you're playing international matches, it's a lot of results-driven business, and I think that if you afford, and us as supporters afford patience to Greg and what he's trying to do over the next maybe 12, 18 months, then you can see long-term gains from that. But it's just got to be a patience thing, because I think next year's Six Nations will be a tough place for them. Yeah,
because Rory, Anthony Eddy, if I can dare reference his interview, he did make the point that with the 7s and 15s doubling up, other countries do it, and he mentioned a couple of Welsh players who do it and it works okay. And Niamh mentioned the key point, the fundamental point, is a lack of playing numbers, and that's where the RFU really have to try and improve matters. But in the interim, there may be a scarcity of resources, and so you can see how that doubling up is a tempting option for them. But to state the obvious, if you're a new coach coming in and you're trying to plan for the Six Nations, we wouldn't say to Andy Farrell, listen, get planning, get thinking about the Six Nations. But we don't really know. You may be without 5 first-team players here and there at certain points, and we'll decide closer to the event. Up to you.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure, Niamh can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that other countries do it to the extent that Ireland do at the moment. But again, Ireland have the playing resources they have, and that's the strategy. I think, so between now and the Six Nations, we will have these 2 reviews, and I think there's the World Cup review, which, they've already replaced the coach, and Anthony Eddy's already given his opinions in the public, so I'm not sure what value that will have. But the overall structural review, the league needs to be the big focus. I think Niamh would agree. Like, there's massive there's a massive disparity between the top 4 teams and the rest, and the players who are allowed to play, because some of them aren't being allowed to play on a week-to-week basis, are not being tested regularly enough. After Christmas, when they separate and the top 4 play against each other more regularly, it'll become probably a bit boring, but probably be better games. I mean, I think, Niamh, the AIL final is currently scheduled during the Six Nations. Is that, these are things that shouldn't be happening that are currently scheduled.
I'm no administrative expert, but I would have thought that's not a good idea.
Look, these are all things that women's rugby needs its own director. Maybe that's reporting to Anthony Eddy, but it needs someone at the table who is just looking at women's rugby, who's over the AIL, who's over the Interpros, who knows where these things all fit, who can align them. I mean, Lynn Cantwell would be the obvious, I think, choice. Maybe Lynn Cantwell comes in at a higher port than that. She is the director of women's rugby in South Africa at the moment. The whole thing needs to be looked at from, I think, an outside lens. Amanda Bennett's doing it at the moment with a review. There's a lot to fix, and we can only scratch the surface on a show like this, but I think the last couple of weeks have shown that, and I just hope that now there is these reviews, there's a change between the two coaches, there will be a number of retirements, and a new group will come in under a new coach, and those barriers to success will hopefully be removed in the next couple of years. But the barriers still exist, and it doesn't seem to be as urgent to the RFU as it maybe should be.
Yeah, so there's 2 points here. Like, Niamh, the administrative side of things and getting the game in order here is hugely important, and the RFU should not be let off the hook here. But I think it is worth restating, based on what you and many others have said over the last while, there is enough talent in this group to play better rugby. Catch pass needs to improve, skill set needs to improve, performances need to improve. Like, there is no reason, while the longer term stuff is hopefully sorted out and quickly, there's no reason we can't expect more of the current squad, and they shouldn't be immune from criticism either, or like, maybe that's harsh on them at the moment.
No, absolutely, I 100% agree. I think there was no in an overall structure and on paper, that squad should have qualified for the World Cup, and they know that. Like, they're not unaware of that, I think, for sure. And I think that there's still a lot of talent that are still coming through. I think, all I had to do, if you ever get a chance and the Leinster under-18 girls are playing any match near you, you should go and watch it. There's some incredible players there because the work that's done on the ground, and Munster are starting to do that as well.
Right.
I just think there's a lot, like Colin McEntee's over the domestic game now. I'd love to see him come in line to that women's high performance, because he understands, the direction that the game needs to go in. I think it just seems to be almost just, it's not even like it's not like they don't care. It's not at all. It just seems to be a breakdown in communication maybe between the two, if that makes any sense. And those senior squad are under a high performance unit, whereas the rest of the game, so the Interpros and the AIL, is run on the domestic side of the game. So they're two different agencies within one umbrella, if that makes any sense. I just think just get that a little bit better aligned, then hopefully we can bear the fruits of that. But yeah, it's just going to take time, and it just I feel like I'm in the face by urging patience, and maybe maybe I'm naive in that, but I really do feel when I watch games week in, week out at AIL level, watch Interpros, and I see the likes of Ella Roberts or Maggie Boylan and these young girls that are coming through, that I'm like, okay, then we're definitely going in the right direction. It might not be quick enough or good enough for people at the moment, but you can't magically grow players ready for international rugby off trees. There has to be some sort of foundation, and hopefully Greg can align AIL clubs into that and do really good work. I definitely have faith that he can.
Okay. Our rugby coverage here and off the ball is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team of us, everyone in. We have Niamh Briggs and Rory O'Connor to week 6 of the United Rugby Championship. I don't think, by the way, Rory, it's a bad thing for this competition. Whatever about the fringe players at the various provinces who aren't getting game time that they might have got, and I have a certain sympathy for them, and maybe we'll see smaller squads, which is a point we touched on before. But in terms of the integrity of the competition, I think it's better that we now pick up where we left off in round 5, as opposed to, let's be honest, the vast majority of rugby fans going, well, I can only watch so many matches in any given weekend.
No, absolutely.
What's happened in this competition over the last month? Who's who? Who's where?
100%, but I think there is a missing link. I think the provinces are releasing players much more to the AIL this year, which means that you went to see Jack Crowley play for Cork Connacht a couple weeks ago. He was playing against Ben Healy in Garryowen a week later. But I do think the provinces will look to maybe fill a gap with maybe a Celtic Cup, or I assume you can't have a URC Cup where you're going off to South Africa to play your seconds teams, but some sort of more local tournament where you can get those players provincial game time during that window. But from a URC point of view, it's way better because it feels more of an event.
Yeah.
The best most, like this week, most of the internationals are on holidays. If you check Instagram, you'll find where they are. So they won't be available. That's fair enough.
That's been your quote unquote journalism.
My sources,
all those kids out there thinking about their journalism degree.
Yeah, go on Ryanbar's Instagram and see where he is.
Rory just spends 48 hours checking out Tyke Furlong's Instagram to see where he is.
That's it. Well, that's how you find out these days. They're not mentioned in the press releases, but there will be good players.
He walked into the studio. Joey Carberry engaged. Did you see that? I said I didn't. But
and congratulations to him.
Listen.
So that's. But this is how you find things out. But yeah, so this week we won't have the full internationals. Next week we probably will.
Okay.
But they are better games, and the Welsh and Scottish and South African teams will be stronger as well because they're not, they're dealing at the same hand. The Scots will be off as well. It's a better tournament. It's definitely a better tournament this year.
You have to treat your own tournament with a bit of respect, almost, Niamh, and make events out of the games, not just play off a load of matches that nobody's watching because international matches are on. So I definitely, you'd almost look forward now to week 6. Almost picking up the narrative of where you were and knowing where you were as opposed to playing catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. From a Munster point of view, this is a really incredibly tough block of games. Obviously, 2 matches away in South Africa into 2 an away trip for Wasps, and then Cast, and then your derbies, your local interpros. So and it's funny, I met one of the lads before they flew out to South Africa, and he was like, I just can't wait, like, I can't believe that we lost to Ospreys, and I just like that performance, that's the last time we played, and that's like tough for them, to wait 4 weeks for to try and rectify mistakes that they had. But I think it's really good. I'm really enjoying it so far. I think that we're going to see better games with South Africans now being able to play at home and having their players all back from obviously the Rugby Championship or their autumn series. So yeah, look, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for everybody, but I think that's what we want, isn't it? If we want to see good, high quality games, and we probably didn't see it at the start of this tournament just yet, but I think that it's ramping up now.
So again, to get us back in the headspace, Champions Cup weekend starts, first weekend of the tournament starts December 10th. So we're back with URC week 6. Connacht Ospreys, as I mentioned earlier on, Friday 7:35. Bulls Munster is 5:45 Irish time, and Leinster Ulster also on Saturday, like the Bulls Munster game, at 8 o'clock. We'll start Bulls Munster for a moment. So Bulls have had an interesting time. They were whipped by Leinster opening day, and they were kind of talked about as maybe the most promising South African side, and then they lost to the Sports Ground, and Jake White made some comments which Andy Friend didn't love. Then they beat Cardiff, and then they lost to Edinburgh, and then they had a bye week. So here they are on home soil for the first time, and so now things get really interesting. For Munster, I've spent far too many nights asking Niamh, did we see Stephen Larkham's fingerprints on that Munster performance? So I won't have to ask that from next season. This is a blow for Munster, Rory. Stephen Larkham's leaving. Did we ever see his fingerprints? I don't know.
It's very hard to tell. It's very, very hard to tell. It's bad news when Munster released it after their press conference yesterday. So Johan van Graan came out and did his press conference about going home to Pretoria, his home city. He went to school across the road from Loftus Versfeld, where the game will be on this weekend. He was a ball boy there. He saw Mandela. He saw Jonah Lomu there as a ball boy. Lovely stuff. And he got his first job at the Bulls. And this was what we were all going to write. And then a couple of hours later, the Munster have confirmed that Stephen Larkham was returning to Australia to probably take up a role with the Brumbies. They didn't say which club it was, but it looks like where he's going to go. The players speak very highly of him, but I don't know if we've seen enough change over the 2 years to know how much of a blow this is. What I think it is definitely worrying is the number of coaches who leave this setup. So you lost Flannery and Jones, who walked away 2 years ago.
Yeah, that is a source of frustration for the players over the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Well, think about it, like Rob Penny did 2 years, then Anthony Foley did 2 years, then they brought in Razzie for who took over as the overall guy. Then obviously Anthony Foley sadly passed away. Razzie's gone the following year. Then they bring in Van Graan. He's getting going, and there's two key assistants leave, and then one of the marquee assistant they brought in, he's a senior coach. He holds the same role as Stuart Lancaster has in Leinster.
Right.
Whether he has the same influence, I'm not sure, but he's there 2 years and then he's gone. And I do think the personal stuff there is a lot of validity in that. I think his family has found it hard to settle in Limerick, particularly during COVID, which I can only imagine weren't moving across the world. And he has a huge connection to the Brumbies, so I understand the reasons for him to go, but from the outside looking in, it doesn't look particularly good. It's another quest to go out and find a new attack coach who sets your attacking identity. They've struggled with that attacking identity ever since Van Graan came in, and really beforehand, since Penny, they've moved different directions. Noel McNamara is the name that's coming up around it. Irish coach is currently working in the Sharks, very, very highly regarded, but wouldn't have the same clout or heft as Larkham's name. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. I would like to see Mike Prendergast certainly be considered for it. Will they just go, hang on a second, why are we retaining this whole coaching team altogether? Will we get someone else in? They've got about 10 former Munster players doing very well in the coaching world, including O'Gara, O'Connell, James Cronin, James Collin is coaching Toulon, Prendergast. There's loads of former, Flannery and Jones are doing brilliant since they left Munster. They've got so many big decisions to make, and it undermines everything they've done in the last 3 years, and leaves them in a very precarious position once again, which they've just seemed to have perennially been in since their glory days.
Yeah, Niamh?
Yeah, I was really disappointed when I heard the news yesterday. I really like him. I've had the opportunity to observe his training sessions, and I think he's class, and I'm not sure that we did get to see the best of him at times. I just don't know whether that was in his hands or not. You've got to look at lots of things, multifaceted. I think players at his disposal, can they play the game that he wants to play? Coaching ticket, do they want to play that type of way? And it can be really frustrating or difficult. But I do know that his family were struggling, 2 young daughters, especially. So look, I can see it, and I'm kind of I was more upset. Obviously, I obviously like him, but I was more upset for the players, I think, because another upheaval, and to announce it this early in the season, I think it's just a bit weird, isn't it, to be able to go back into to when they all come back in together, probably once they come back from, well, the internationals come back in and you have a whole full group. It's hard to kind of see how that's managed, knowing that he's going at the end of the season.
You're not kind of working indefinitely towards a vision in the future. You're working towards an endpoint, which is very much on the horizon, and that does undermine things. So
I think his class, to be fair.
Right.
And
the stuff you saw, say, in the training sessions, we weren't necessarily seeing that as much as we might have liked on match day?
No, but I just think his level of detail is very good. His ability to be able to get his point across the players, and I agree with Rory. Any of them that you talk to, they all speak really highly of him. And I just think that it was just taking time, and I did see small smatterings of it this season, things I hadn't seen before. I know that I've been trying to convince you for a few weeks about it now, but
I think you're seeing things. I mean,
I definitely do.
One pop pass, and you're like, you see.
No, you could see them looking to get to the edge a little bit more and to have something. I think at times, so for Munster, when they're on top, they can definitely produce it. I think we've seen that when they're under pressure, they kind of revert back to type, and that's what pressure does. It reverts you. You go back into your shell a little bit. I thought the game against Scarlets was prime example. They were so much on top of Scarlets, they were able to have the freedom to play the way they wanted. And I think, I'm just disappointed for him and for the playing group too, to be fair.
Okay. So we'll watch that match. That's 5:45. I think it's on TG Car. Then Leinster against Ulster. Back to your Instagram watching. What kind of full strength sides are we going to see or not see here?
Ulster are without Ian Henderson, who picked up an injury before the game, but otherwise I think all of their Ireland contingent are available. Vermeulen's off playing for the Babas, but he'll become an Ulster player after that. So Leinster will be that kind of old-fashioned, Pro 14 Leinster, who still largely managed to beat everyone with, Rhys Ruddock, Dan Levy type players who are all very good. Ross Byrne probably starting. I'm sure someone like Harry Byrne, who didn't see a lot of action, he'll probably be on the bench. So it'll still be a very good Leinster team. I think that'll be it's probably Ulster's best opportunity to win in the RDS for a while, and I think if they ever did get that win in the RDS, it would mean an awful lot to them. And based on what Dan McFarlane has presumably been ramming that message home for the 5 weeks that they've been, they probably had a week off and they've been training. That Connacht performance was so far. That's the last game was in Dublin. They're coming back to Dublin. They build teams around these things. You would imagine you're soon going to see some sort of reaction from these Ulster players. Their pride must be wounded. There's so many former Leinster players in there as well who have a point to prove. Nick Timoney probably be involved. Guys like that who always want to play well against Leinster because it's where they're from. I think we will see some sort of response, but the response has never been good enough to win this fixture in the last couple of years.
Because I was just thinking again, like we were saying, that the competition pauses and we have these 5 weeks. I mean, the last time we heard from Dan McFarland after the Aviva performance against Connacht, he was raging. And what did I learn from today? Do you know the one thing I saw about us? We're not good when we're favourites. I find that so frustrating. And he kind of went off and won. And I was thinking, God, that's going to be a long 5 weeks training there. You know? So I'd be surprised if they don't come out in a big way.
You would hope for a response, absolutely. and they have all the tools to win a game like that. But you know, they've gone close against Leinster a couple of times, and this won't be Tyke Furlong, Andrew Porter, Ronan Kelleher.
Yeah.
You know, it might be Dan Sheehan, but even Brian Bird has been given a week off. You know, a lot of the players who've been playing for Ireland for the last couple of weeks have been given time off, so there's a sense of vulnerability there. But Leinster are very rarely actually vulnerable, and they've been very good this season, apart from that Dragons game. So you would expect Leinster, having had a second pre-season with this team, to be quite sharp. And I would expect, even with Ulster's full first team, that's where we are right now. You know, Leinster have 32 internationals on their books. You know, so they have a second team pretty much who've all played either for Ireland, who played for Ireland. Although Ala Alatoa is off at Samoa, so he's not around either. He's playing against the Barbarians, so there's one each we're missing.
Okay. Well, we'll watch with interest. That's 8 o'clock on Saturday evening. Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent, thanks very much.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Niamh.
Niamh Briggs, great to have you on as always. Thanks, Niamh.
Thanks a million. Thanks, guys. See you
Cheers.
later.
See ya.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.